Live in 10 seconds. It's not even a picture there. Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, adoption of agenda. I have a mover, Councillor Wilson, seconder, Councillor Kenny, that council approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Adoption of the minutes. I have a mover, Councillor Decker, and a seconder, Councillor Neal, that council approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Mayor's report. On Wednesday, February 9th, Statistics Canada released the population figures of the 2021 census. The City of Thorold was Niagara's fastest growing municipality with a population increase of 26.7%. Thorold grew from 18,801 in 2016 to 23,816 in 2021, ranking it the 8th fastest growing municipality in Canada with populations greater than 5,000, and 4th in Ontario. Location, available developable land, and quality of life were all factors that contributed to this growth rate. The City of Thorold received a $58,400 Resilient Communities Fund grant from the Ontario Trillium Foundation to enhance safety and accessibility at the Thorold Public Library. The grant allowed the library to install new service desks, public computer stations, and study corrals with accessibility upgrades and COVID-19 safeguards. Torchbearer nominations are now open for the Niagara 2022 Canada Summer Games. The Niagara Host Society is welcoming nominations and applications for the Canada Summer Games Torch Relay until March 31st. This year's Torch Relay will kick off with a lighting ceremony in Ottawa. Successful applicants will carry the torch for 1 kilometer along one of Niagara's municipalities. Please apply online. Visit Niagara2022games.ca for more details and to apply. That's Niagara2022games.ca. Wednesday, February 23rd is Anti-Bullying Day or Pink Shirt Day. It originated in Canada and is now celebrated on various dates around the world. We encourage everyone to wear pink on the 23rd to symbolize a stand against bullying. It is so important that victims of bullying know that they are not alone and there is help and support available. Wearing pink on this day sends a strong message to them that others care. Today is National Flag of Canada Day. At noon on February 15th, 1965, Canada's red and white maple leaf flag was raised for the very first time on Parliament Hill. GoVax will be hosting 2 more vaccination clinics at Holy Rosary Hall this week on Thursday, February 17th and Friday, February 18th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. both days. Each day from 10 to 3 p.m., they will be administering the Pfizer vaccine to those 12 years of age and up. From 3 to 4:30 on those days, the Pfizer pediatric vaccine will be administered to those ages 5 to 11. And from 4:30 to 5:30, the Moderna vaccine to those 18 years of age and older. Pfizer is the recommended vaccine for ages 18 to 29, but people can select Moderna with informed consent. These are pop-up, walk-in style clinics. First, second, and booster doses are available. More details are available on the City of Thorold Facebook page. Ontario is moving into the next phase of reopening on February 17th, followed by a further removal of restrictions on March 1st. Masking requirements will remain in place at this time with a specific timeline to lift this measure to be communicated at a later date. More details are available on the provincial website, ontario.ca, and the City of Thorold website, thorold.ca. Nominations for the 2022 T. Roy Adams Humanitarian of the Year Award are now open. This year marks the 20th year of this award, which honors the memory of the late regional councillor T. Roy Adams. It is presented annually to a current resident of Niagara who best exemplifies his values and dedication to community service, a person who sees volunteerism as an integral part of their life. Nominations to be submitted to the Regional Clerk's Office by March 31st, 2022. The award will be presented at a Regional Council meeting in July. Please visit the Niagara Region website for more information. That's niagararegion.ca. Congratulations to Gates McPherson, who is an NCAA track and field champion and a high honor student at Endicott College in Boston, where she is currently in her third year.
But the removal of the vaccine certificate program of March is a little too soon. Co-owner Cindy Stern says they'll be keeping it
One
a little
sec,
longer.
we're getting okay. I'll start again. Congratulations to Gate McPherson, who is an NCAA track and field champion and high honor student at Endicott College in Boston, where she is currently in her third year. She is a Dean's Honor List, inducted into Sigma Tau Delta International English Honor Society, and became an esteemed member of the Mortar Board, which recognizes college seniors for superior achievement. Thorold is hometown proud. Also, 10-year-old Emma Segur will be recognized for her fundraising efforts last December when she organized and raised over 900 pounds of food for those less fortunate in the community. She will be honored at center ice and presented with a signed jersey by her favorite Niagara Ice Dog at their upcoming home game on Sunday, February 20th at 2 p.m. Emma is the daughter of Samantha Segur, who is a casual employee at the City of Thorold. Congratulations, Emma. February 14th to 20th marks the first nonprofit sector appreciation week, which will take place moving forward on the third week of February each year. This Appreciation Week is intended to recognize the exceptional individuals in the nonprofit sector whose work transforms the lives of individuals, families, and communities as they work alongside communities. Thank you for all you do. Monday, February 21st is Family Day. Here are some events. There is a free ice skate at the Thorold Community Arena that day from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Also, Darlene Ryan, Port Robinson Community Center will be hosting their 4th annual Pasta Dinner fundraiser, takeout only on Family Day. All proceeds go to upgrades and beautification of the center. There are 2 takeout pickup options, 4 to 5 p.m. and 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Tickets are $15 for adults and $6 for children. Call Judy at 705-725-6847 or Marty at 289-213-9995. Details can also be found on the Port Robinson Community Center Facebook page. On behalf of City Council and staff, a very happy Family Day to all. Enjoy not only Family Day, but the entire long weekend with your families, and stay safe. And that's the end of my mayor's remarks. Up next, public meetings. We have a public meeting, official plan, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of common element condominium. Opening remarks and purpose of the meeting. This public meeting is being held pursuant to the provisions of sections 51, 17, 22, and 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended. The applicant has submitted draft plan of condominium, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment applications to facilitate the development of the subject lands for residential uses in the form of single detached and townhouse dwelling, as well as mixed-use apartment building containing residential units and ground floor commercial space. Council will receive and consider all comments received at the public meeting. No decision on the applications will be made this evening. If council makes a decision under the aforementioned sections of the Planning Act, appeal rights may be available to certain persons or public bodies depending on the council's decision and the application type. Further information on appeals rights can be obtained by contacting City Planning before council makes a decision on the applications. Up first, I have a presentation from the applicant's agent, Keith McKinnon, KLM Planning Partners Incorporated. And Keith, are you there? It'll just be a second here. We there? Okay. Keith, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council, staff, members of the public. My name is Keith McKinnon. I'm with KLM Planning Partners, Inc. Here before you this evening on behalf of Starflower Properties, Inc., care of DG Group, in relation to a draft plan of common element condominium, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment applications that we have filed on their behalf. As it relates to Block 37 on Registered Plan 59M 184. I'm going to share my screen, and I do have a presentation for council to, if I can have that enabled, please.
Is he? 1 second, Keith.
No problem, Your Worship.
Keith, please try now.
There you go. You're
Okay.
up, Keith. Yep.
Great, thank you. Okay, so to start off, the subject parcel of land that is before council this evening for public meeting is the area you see in the air photo highlighted in red, and it's located at the northwest corner of Collier Road and Confederation Avenue. As noted, it is Block 37 on Registered Plan 59M 184, which was a future development block as part of the overall Confederation Heights community. It is a tad irregular in shape, of course, given the interchange to Highway 58, and it's approximately 6.1 hectares in size. This is the development proposal that we submitted as part of our applications. In total, it is providing 225 units based on a mixture of 4 13.7 meter single detached dwelling units. And on the next slide, I'll go into further detail as sort of where these are located. There's 38 6.1 meter street townhouses, 58 6.1 meter decked townhouses, and 79 4.5 meter decked townhouses. In addition to that, we have a 3-story apartment building with ground floor commercial. And then we have some private amenity spaces that you can see here that are labeled as parkettes. in addition to a walkway connection that heads through the existing connection over to Divine Crescent to the west. And in total, we have some surface related parking as it relates to the commercial / apartment building, along with some additional lay-by parking spaces associated to the townhouse units themselves. So this graphic forms part of our urban design brief. That was one of the requirements as part of our complete application submission. And you can see here through the label. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly run from effectively sort of the southwest corner in clockwise fashion. So down here at the southwest, there's those 4 single detached dwelling units that we had mentioned. Effectively, they're not forming part of our overall application because these 4 single detached dwelling units are going to be created through exemption of part lot control, given that this block is already a block on a registered plan of subdivision. Moving upwards, we have along the westerly edge, 6.1 meter street townhouse units. So those would be a typical street townhouse unit that we have created in much of the Confederation Heights community. Then in the center portion of the plan, we have a mixture of 6.1 and 4.5 meter deck townhouse units. So some of the units themselves, their front doors will either face a local condominium street, or their front doors will face the local parkette. So as an example, this block here where you can see my cursor, their front doors itself would be fronting directly onto the linear parkette. And given that this is a common element condo draft plan, all these uses in this plan itself, save and except for the 4 single detached dwelling units, would all be condominium. So the parkettes, et cetera, would all be formed and under the ownership of the future condominium corporation. And then lastly, along the southeast corner of the plan, so right at the corner of Confederation and Collier, we have a 3-story apartment building with ground floor commercial with about 3,000 square meters of commercial floor space proposed. So here we have some graphic material for council and for members of the public to get an idea of sort of what we're envisioning here. So you can see here from the graphic, these are units that front with their front doors directly onto a parkette feature. And that's exactly the type of feature that we're envisioning as part of this concept plan, as noted earlier. It's the same with the graphic here on the side. And you can see here on the right-hand side of the slide, these units themselves, as an example, their front doors face this parkette. And similarly for the units on this graphic, their front doors would all front directly onto this the proposed linear parkway. In terms of additional graphic materials, these 2 slides here represent a typical 6.1 meter street townhouse that we would be proposing a similar style within this plan. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see these are representative of decked laneway townhouses as the front portion of what they would look like. So you can tell they're 3 stories in height with their front doors and facades themselves facing directly out into, again, it'll either be the parkette or some cases it will be a street. But that's just to give you an idea of representative examples that have been created elsewhere. The next few slides are what the rear of the units face or will look like. And so these are all internal, of course. So any of the laneways, if you were to drive down one of the future laneways, this is what you would see. So as an example, you can see the decked portion. So this is the amenity space, the private amenity space. So instead of having a typical rear yard amenity space that you would see in a normal ground related product, that's not provided in this. This is a new style of housing of which I don't believe is offered in Thorold today. And what it is instead of having a traditional rear yard, they have their amenity space above the garage. And you can see there's also another deck portion off the living space on the 3rd floor. And then they have the garage on the ground floor. And in the 6.1 meter deck towns, it would be a double car garage. So it'd be 2 spaces in the garage, parking spaces, and 2 parking spaces on the driveway. In the 4.5 meter deck towns, it would be a single car garage. So it would be 1 parking space in the garage and 1 parking space on the driveway. Again, a similar example, just of a different viewpoint to give council and members of the public an idea of what these would look like. And again, I guess I should reiterate, these deck towns, if we go back to that other plan, is only the internal portion of the units. The units that are on the western edge of the plan, that's a traditional townhouse. So these are not what would be proposed along the westerly portion of the plan. Again, one more graphic for council and members of the public to see what a deck townhouse could look like. We've provided a conceptual phasing plan to give an idea of sort of what we would be thinking about in terms of how we see this block to be developed. So it would be all generally what I call low rise. So it would be your standard townhouses, the 4 single detached dwellings, and the deck towns in the middle that would be developed all within the first phase. And then the second phase would be the apartment building with the ground floor commercial. These are 2 graphical examples of what the apartment building could look like at the corner of Confederation and Collier, just to give you an idea of sort of the ideas from an architectural standpoint of what we're thinking about in that area, to really provide something of a good focal point from a street edge perspective, pedestrian oriented, it's pedestrian scale, with great architectural design. So in terms of any planning application, we have a number of documents that we have to take into consideration. Of course, we have our provincial higher level documents, one of which, of course, is the provincial policy statement. I certainly won't go through the entire slide, but of course, we take into consideration the policies within the provincial policy statement. In our view, we think that these applications, are certainly are consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement. Similarly, we have the growth plan, places to grow, growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Again, similarly, we have a minimum requirement of 50 persons and jobs per hectare. Our proposal would provide approximately 507 persons and jobs per hectare. So it's a good dense product while still providing some street level, ground oriented type housing. So we have quite a range and mix of uses that would be proposed in this block. And by providing some higher density uses, of course, we're certainly using land and infrastructure to its greatest extent. Certainly, in our opinion, we believe these applications conform to the growth plan. Regional Niagara official plan designates this as a built-up area in accordance with Schedule A of the regional official plan. So we have, in our view, we certainly are in conformity to the regional official plan. We have the City of Thorold official plan, which dual designates the subject property. So on the westerly half of this block is designated as living area, and the easterly portion in the pink that you can see here is designated as general commercial on your schedule, schedule within your official plan. Our official plan amendment that we have filed is to effectively designate the general commercial portion, so it's the eastern half of the land, from general commercial to urban living area, and as well to remove the site-specific policy that was proposed originally in the official plan. The City of Thorold zoning bylaw, similar to the official plan, also dual zones the subject property. So we have a future development zone and we have a neighborhood commercial zone. So the future development zone is the westerly portion, and the neighborhood commercial C4 zone is on the easterly portion. So our zoning bylaw amendment application that we have filed on behalf of Starflower Properties, Inc. Is to rezone both the future development and the neighborhood commercial to residential first density, residential third density, residential fourth density, and open space, all of which would have some site-specific provisions to deal with some setback components. Obviously, the deck towns is not a product that is currently identified in the zoning bylaw in terms of the setbacks that would be required for that. So things such as a front yard, reduced rear yard, potentially the height for the deck towns would all be required to be amended. So those have been included within the application. This slide here is just an example or not example, but is the draft plan common element condo plan that was filed as part of our application. So everything you can see here in highlight with the hatching is everything that would be the common element. So the common element is the portions of which that would be under control of the condominium corporation. So everything in here from street plowing to garbage pickup to street maintenance, any property standards issues, all of those things would be addressed by the condominium corporation and would not be a requirement for the municipality to take care of that. As part of our complete application, Your Worship, members of council, we had a number of different studies that we had to prepare and submit. A few here, of course, plan justification report, urban design brief, a noise report, and functional servicing and transportation were all provided as part of our complete application and are with the municipality for review should members of the public have an interest to review of any of those materials. And so with that, Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions council or members of the public might have.
Thank you, Keith. So if we can go back to the gallery view, I'll open the floor for questions with Keith. Keith, just one thing, I'll give you a little, to change one of your slides. It has, Thorold will be 23,200 by 2031. Just to let you know that with the latest census, we're 23,816 as of 2021.
I did hear that. Thank you.
So,
it's obviously
we're ahead of the 2031
news, so
already.
hot off the press.
Questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
For you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Keith. Keith, do you have anything similar to this in any other community in Southern Ontario that we can refer to or make references to?
In terms of that's been built or that's been
something a similar concept that you're doing here. Is there any other models that you have that KLM has done?
So we have certainly proposed them in other communities. Whether or not they've actually been built yet is a good question. I don't know. But we certainly have proposed this product type in Brampton as an example, Markham as an example, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Vaughan also has as well. But I'm happy to follow up with you, Councillor DeRose, to give you some exact locations of where you might be able to see an example of a built product that's physically on the ground.
Okay. Thank you. And also, Keith, do you guys ever incorporate using local labor, the local labor force, or is it you guys? Like, I take it you guys are from Toronto.
So my firm itself is out of Vaughan, as is DG Group, but certainly they do have local builders there. Mountain View is one of their local builders. So you know, I'm not quite sure if they use local labor. I would assume they do, but I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the presenter. Have you done a study on the commercial aspect of the property? Since you're changing it from commercial to some other designation. I know that over the period of time, we have had businesses come to take a look at whether to put a grocery store or other of those types of facilities in there. So have you done a study?
So one of the subsidiary companies of DG Group, Metros Properties, is a commercial arm. And they have been approaching many different, whether it be grocery store operators or other commercial entities, to see if they would have an interest in locating on this property. And unfortunately, there has not been any interest. In particular, as it relates to the grocery store component, you know, the comment that keeps coming back that I've been advised is that with all the grocery stores in close proximity in St. Catharines, the market area wasn't large enough to support a grocery store in this location. So having actual physical study, no, but given that my client is in the commercial business as well, they have exhausted their contacts to try and put a commercial use here to no avail.
Okay, that's good. Second question is, what's the price point of these condominiums that you're going to put in? What's the sale price? What am I going to pay for one?
Yeah, so great question. And if I knew that answer, I'd be retired by now. So honestly, I don't have an answer right now because it will obviously be dictated by the market and timing of when my client decides to go to the market. So I don't have an answer for you, Councillor.
It's just that affordable housing is a big issue now, and we want to make sure that part of the projects that we see coming forward are affordable. So that's my question. That's why I had my question.
No, I appreciate that. And I think, certainly with the 4.5 meter townhouses and with the apartment building, it certainly will provide a more affordable product type, but, not necessarily be the affordable under the definition of the provincial policy statement.
Thank you. Councillor Neal, are you done? Okay, I got Councillor Hanley. Did you have your hand up, Councillor Hanley?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Just with your condominium group, to me, I'm asking this question because it looks like it may be more suited to student housing, and then a condominium, they got party decks and where the entrances are into the parkettes. But my question is, this condominium group will be your typical condominium group, no noise after 11 o'clock. You'll have to, the garbage was going to have to be maintained. Obviously, you said it's going to be condominium group. You'll take care of the sidewalks, that's some of the garbage, but it's getting that garbage to the sidewalks. Will there be property standards, notices like agreements in there in regards to what is expected of you? Because I know a condominium, everybody's got to have a certain type of garden. You only allowed certain type of trees. You only allowed certain type of lighting. Is that what type of condominium we're looking at here? Or is a condominium just going to be condominium corporation but wide open?
Yeah, no, through you, Your Worship, Councillor Hanley, this is your standard condominium corporation. So yes, everything that you've outlined there, garbage pickup timing, property standard requirements, property maintenance companies that will be retained to cut grass, both on properties and the parkettes and snow plowing. So all of that will be provided as part of this condominium corporation that will be the future owner of these common elements.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, Mr. Mayor. Also, as through what Councillor Neal stated in regards to the commercial component of it, and that your client has gone out to see if maybe grocery stores are interested. What type of commercial element are you going to think that you're going to attract to your commercial component there? Are you looking like convenience stores, delis type of deal?
Yeah, so the proposal that we have in the concept plan is for a total of about 3,000 square meters of commercial floor space. So the thought is that likely will be carved up into multiple units. So yes, probably maybe a convenience store, potential nail salons, or smaller type commercial units that would be located within the ground floor of that building.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Hanley. Councillor Sutton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thanks for the presentation, Keith. A couple questions on what everybody else was saying. So how much of the space is considered condominium and under control? I'm sure you've heard about our problems with students and partying and everything else in other areas. To build another area like that would be a nightmare. So how much of it is actually condominium control?
Yeah, so through you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Sutton. So good question. And you probably don't know, but I was the one that actually, through my clients, brought all the student housing that you see on Shimon Parkway today, and including the one that hasn't yet been built on the west side of Shimon Parkway. So we certainly have heard about the student housing issues for many years through Confederation Heights, and then obviously by trying to help that situation by building purpose-built student housing facilities. So yeah, we are certainly well aware. So the common element portion is all the roadways, the parkettes, and any of the parking areas, the walkways, etc. Those will all be the common elements that will be owned by the condominium corporation. whereas the units themselves will be separately owned, like individually owned by separate owners.
Okay, so how would you, Councillor Neal or Councillor Hanley said, how would you control, because the common elements are condominium, you can control noise, that type of thing. You can put guidelines down for the houses. You can't own a house, or you can't dictate what's in the houses, but can you control what happens in the area by calling it a condominium in that common area?
So all of that can be addressed through their condominium declarations. So anything that is requirements would be through their condominium declarations.
Okay, well, I like that a lot better. I hope that area can be controlled through that. Second question, just on top of what Councillor Neal said, is there any interest for the apartment building to possibly be through the group to be partially affordable housing, or come in with us on something that could help out the affordable housing issues in Thorold? I'm putting you on the spot, if you could find out.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Of course, affordable housing is an issue we run into everywhere. So certainly Thorold's not a special case in that scenario. Right. We haven't honestly discussed actual purpose-built affordable housing. We don't know, quite honestly, what the city of Thorold has, if you have opportunities for grants or otherwise to assist with those types of things. So certainly happy to open a dialogue to that discussion, but I can tell you at this current juncture with the applications we've filed before you, that it does not provide an affordable housing component as it relates to the definition of what affordable housing is through the provincial policy statement. Because in our view, the product type that we're proposing, in particular the apartments and the 4.5 meter deck towns, again, it's a product that's smaller. It's obviously going to be at a much lower price point than you would for your single detached dwellings, let alone for your 6.1 meter townhouses. So by virtue, those are going to be affordable on their own. But does it meet the definition of provincial policy statement today? Not likely. But again, happy to open a discussion to see if maybe there's something available, but that's not the way our applications have been filed.
Okay, thank you. Let's open those discussions up and see if there's any chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sentence. Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, my question for Keith would be, you're talking about building 225 units and you're asking for help because you want smaller backyards and smaller front yards. What if you took followed all our bylaws at Thorold and just made the proper front yards and backyards and followed all the rules? How many units would you get in there?
So we haven't undertaken that design exercise at this point, because we're doing that would defeat the purpose of providing you with a product type that's not available in Thorold today, and one of which we think that would be a benefit to the community and provide you with a range of product type at a different price point. So we haven't undertaken that exercise at this point because we didn't feel it was appropriate. Okay, well, just to let you know, me as a counselor, we get developers coming all the time asking for easements on front yards, backyards, and it upsets a lot of people in the neighborhoods. I would just like this message for you and all the rest of the developers. Why don't you just follow the rules, come back with designs for the proper front yards, proper backyards, with no easements, and everything will pass easy. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Is there anyone else that has questions for Keith? Seeing none, Keith, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate you coming to council.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Now, we're turning it over to a presentation from city staff. Paul Clausen, Senior Planner, will present. Paul, are you there?
I'm here, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. If you got a PowerPoint?
Yeah, so one of my colleagues is going to be sharing my presentation. We're kind of doing things a little different tonight. So just if you could let me know when it's up on the screen, that would be great.
It is up.
Okay, great. So for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Paul Clausen. I'm a senior planner at the City of Thorold, and I'm going to be presenting 3 applications received by the city's planning department. So if you could go to the next slide, Denise, please. So I'm just going to go over each individual application in a little bit more detail. The first is the draft plan of condominium. So this application proposes, I guess, the framework for the development. It establishes the blocks where the townhouse buildings are going to be built and the mixed-use building as well in the corner of the development. Keith may have noted this already, but the 4 lots fronting on Confederation Avenue would not be included in the condo, and those are proposed to be freehold. Everything else would be part of the draft plan of condominium. And that also establishes the street network and the linear parkettes as well, and other common element areas. Next slide, please. So the next application I'll speak about is the official plan amendment. Right now, the property is designated, it's split designated actually. On the west side, it's under the urban living area designation, which is primarily residential. And on the east side, it's general commercial. The whole site is subject to a site-specific exception right now in our official plan, which I've noted there, and I'll talk about a little bit more later. The proposal is to amend the official plan to designate this property as urban living area. However, depending on staff's review, it might be appropriate to put it into a site-specific policy designation as well, but it would generally be guided by the urban living area policies. Next slide, please. So the exception that I mentioned, I just have it on the screen. I just wanted to read it so that council understands what the official plan permits here right now. So I'll just start reading. Notwithstanding the permitted uses in section B142 on the lands legally described as block 37, plan 59M 184, 2 to 30 Confederation Avenue, in addition to the policies of the general commercial designation, low and medium density residential uses are permitted on the westerly portion of the property, subject to the following. A, the land shall be designed in a compact, pedestrian-oriented built form comprised of a mix of commercial and or low and medium density residential uses. And B, the city will give consideration to the inclusion of a warning clause or similar method deemed suitable by the city for the purpose of advising future residents in proximity to this area of industrial uses to the east and the potential for impacts to occasionally interfere with the residential uses in the area. So the reason I read that is just to give council an idea that a compact and mixed use built form is called for here in our OP on at least a portion of the property, and that it sort of recognizes the context, the lands being sort of in an industrial area, having some surrounding industrial uses. So Denise, if you could go to the next slide, please. So lastly, I'll talk about the zoning bylaw amendment. So currently the property is zoned FD and C4. It's split in its zoning. The west side is under the FD zone and the east is under the C4 neighborhood commercial zone. The proposed zoning designations are R1D. There's a site-specific open space zone. There's 2 site-specific townhouse zones to reflect the different areas and frontages, and then there's a site-specific R4A zone for the mixed-use block. I'm going to go over those in a little more detail, and then there's a map that you can sort of reference to each one of those zones. So Denise, could you go to the next slide, please? Oh, and there's this other component that I also want to mention. In the context of the area, there's industrial uses. So the applicant is proposing as a mitigation measure to reclassify the lands to a class 4 area under the guideline, the provincial guideline noted below from the Ministry of Environment. And what's happening for currently staff is reviewing that proposal with the region in detail. So the reclassification of the land to deal with potential noise issues. That's something we're looking at, and we'll determine with the region if it's an appropriate way to deal with noise for the residential uses that are proposed. Next slide, please. So this table, it just shows the site-specific OS1 zone that's being proposed, and the only, the only request is that visitor parking be permitted in the OS zone, whereas it's normally not, and that zone corresponds with the strip of land adjacent to the highway where MTO requires a 14-meter setback anyway. So they prefer to use that for some visitor parking. Next slide. So this table on the screen now is one of the townhouse zones, one of the R3A site-specific zones. So there's a list of requests, site-specific requests for this zone. And this one is for the more compact townhomes. You can see the 4.5-meter frontage and the smaller minimum lot areas being proposed. So there's also proposed reductions in setbacks. There's maximum lot coverage being requested of 62%, and certain regulations proposing to not apply, landscaped open space and garage width. And there's also requests for an encroachment into a rear yard for a deck of 3 meters, and another request that up to 8 units be permitted in one building, essentially. Next slide, please. And items 3 to 10 in this table are the same as the last one. This is another proposed zone for townhouses. This one is would have more spacious land units and not as compact dwellings. So you can see that with the first 2 items in the list. The minimum lot area and frontages are larger than the previous table. And lastly, the site-specific, next slide, please. Lastly, the table on the screen shows the R4A site-specific zone being proposed for the mixed-use building. So ground floor commercial is proposed as a permitted use, as well as reductions in parking for the apartment units and for the commercial parking rate per square meter parking rate. Next slide, please. And this is, I would have liked to have flipped back and forth to give you a little bit more reference, but on the screen now is sort of the layout and how it's proposed in the bylaw, in the zoning bylaw amendment. So part 1 in the southwest corner shows the 4 proposed freehold lots. Parts 2 and 3 are the 2 different areas where townhouses are proposed and the different site-specific categories for those areas. Part 4 is the mixed-use block with the proposed mixed-use building, and part 5 is the open space zone, and you can see that visitor parking is proposed in there as well. Next slide. So I just want to outline the process and what's left. So we're at the public meeting stage right now, as you can see on the far left, and we're hearing oral submissions right now. The next step would be that staff would be preparing a recommendation report and incorporating oral and written submissions received up until the report is due. And lastly, at a later meeting, council will make a decision based on staff's recommendation. And the last slide, please. This just has my contact information and a link to all the application materials. So if anyone comes across this, they can reach out to me if they have any questions or want to make any oral or written, written submissions on the application. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. And we're back for questions to Paul. Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Paul, You mentioned earlier, just previous in the report, in regard to noise and controlling the noise. Is that in reference to controlling the noise from resident to resident or from roadway to resident? Because
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hanley, that's in reference to the stationary noise sources around the site. So there's currently, and I think specifically across the street, there's a gas station and a car wash that causes noise levels to exceed provincial standards. And there's also uses across the street that are industrial in nature that could have noise impacts. So by reclassifying the lands, it's a way to, I guess, warn people that there could be impacts who choose to, live there. Like I said, that approach is something that we're looking at, and the region is actually working with us to peer review that approach with another noise consultant. So it's something that we haven't sort of finalized by any stretch. It's something that we're still reviewing.
Okay, thank you very much. Second question, in regards to the maximum lot coverage, 62%. Is the norm 40%?
It depends.
Or what's the norm?
Through the mayor, it depends on the zone. I believe, I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately. I think it's either 45 or 50. I believe it's 45. But I can double check and get back to you if that's some information you want. I think it's 45%, Councillor.
Okay, yeah, if you get that for me, because that just alone makes it a 17% reduction in the actual size of the for the maximum lot coverage. So I thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you. Councillor
Yeah,
Longo.
no problem.
Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Klassen. I have a question regarding slide 11. It's the color-coded one. And
Sure, the one with the map there.
yeah, the one with the part. It shows the different part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Part 2, for example, it says it's being changed from future development to residential third density. But from another previous slide, to me, it looks like it would be from future development and neighborhood commercial to residential. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct, because the split between the two zones is basically right down the middle.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify here. So we're changing a fair bit of neighborhood commercial into residential. I guess my question to you would be, well, maybe a request when your report comes back, how we can justify removing neighborhood commercial and increasing the amount of residential there. So that would be a request. I would like to know how we justify that. And through you, Mr. Mayor. Yep. Sorry.
My apologies. I was just going to say, through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that's something for sure that we'll look at through our review of this.
Perfect. And also some justification, as Councillor Kenny said earlier, people ask about reducing setbacks and increasing lot coverage, and now there's deck encroachments. I'd like to know how we can justify all those things when the report comes back. I don't need an answer tonight, but those are things that I'm concerned about. So if you could address those two issues in the report, I would appreciate it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, Councillor Longo, that's something, we'll probably have some visuals in the report to sort of outline how these things are actually going to come to light, to clarify all the proposed relief, the proposed deviations from the bylaw.
Great, thank you.
Okay, is there any further questions for Paul? Do you have another question, Councillor Longo?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor. I had another one jotted down here. Through you to Mr. Klassen. Will we also know if 225 residential units, obviously I'm going to be concerned about sufficient parking in this neighborhood. I know it's a condominium, but I think we also need to be aware of how they're going to take care of their parking requirements. So if that can be included in the report, I think it would be beneficial for council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, parking is something that we've already started to discuss with the applicant. They actually did provide an urban design brief, which gives an idea of how parking can be accommodated, and that isn't shown on the draft plan of condominium. So we will be looking at that and figuring out what amount is required for, let's say, for visitors versus occupants, and we'll figure out the best way, the best approach to, I guess, incorporating that in the bylaw and these approvals.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Just a question for Paul, and that would be, I don't know if you heard my question earlier, but is there anything that we can do to send a message to developers that we want to follow the rules in Thorold, and when you come back with 225 units and maybe 200 fit, that's probably what we'd like to see. Like 17% is quite a big difference when we're taking away green space, and also we're going up. So, 2 stories. Would you be able to put in your report how many units they could build without asking for any easements or anything?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can talk with the applicant and see how, I guess, what the difference would be for a proposal that fully complies versus one that doesn't. I think, to answer your question, council ultimately makes the decision on this application. Planning staff is going to recommend something that's make a recommendation based on the policies that we have to analyze, and one of the primary goals, I guess, is to facilitate compatible intensification. So if this is, beyond that, if it's too much for the site, we would discuss that with the developer. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that there is some level of intensification that can be done appropriately and made to fit on a site like this. So I think that's what we're going to be working with the developer to achieve. And we're going to go over all the feedback we received from this meeting and figure out what makes the best sense for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanley, you got another question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to a follow-up to what Councillor Longo had said through you, Mr. Mayor, to Paul. In regards to the parking, I don't know, I think we may have resolved ourselves from it. Do we still have the cash in lieu in regards to parking spaces? I know at one time it was supposed to be 1.5 parking spaces per unit, and we would say, well, you need 10, but if you give us so many $1,000 per parking spot, we'll let you go with it. Do we still have that practice in Thorold?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hanley, we do have the ability. I will have to check on that. I know that that's something that still happens in Thorold. Typically, it's applied in the downtown setting. I'm not sure if it can be utilized in any other part of the city, but there's cash in lieu of parking, and then there's cash in lieu of parkland. So maybe I'll touch on that too. Because it's kind of relevant to the application. It's a condo development being proposed, so parkland still has to be paid for because this is a private development. So we'll be, I guess, they're proposing private parkland, but they would also have to pay cash in lieu of public parkland. But in regards to your question on cash in lieu of parking, I will have to look into that and probably get an answer for you at a later time.
Okay, because I think that would be important, because a lot of times I know, as you said, in the downtown core, we would take that, and we know the parking problems we're now faced with in town. So if you could give me that information, we greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Paul, for your presentation, and Denise, thank you both. Okay, so public participation. Now at this time, if there is anyone online who wishes to speak on the applications received, please indicate to the clerk your desire to speak. Please provide your name and address for the public record. There's no one registered, is that correct?
Through the mayor, there's no one registered.
Okay, I'll just read it one more time then. Now at this time, if there is anyone online who wishes to speak on the applications received, please indicate to the clerk your desire to speak. Please provide your name and address for the public record. And we've been told that there's no one registered. So closing remarks and closing of the meeting. This fulfills the requirements of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13, pursuant to sections 51, 17, 22, and 34. Council will consider staff's recommendation report at a future meeting. Please provide your contact information and indicate to the clerk at clerk@thorold.ca. That's clerk@thorold.ca if you wish to receive notice of council's decision. Alternatively, a letter requesting to receive notice of council's decision may be sent to the clerk. As such, the public meeting portion of this application is now closed at 7:31 p.m. Okay, now we move on. Motions for council support. 11A, Town of Aurora, dissolution of OLT, and I have a mover, Councillor DeRose, and a seconder, Councillor Sentence, and I'll turn this over to Councillor DeRose. Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I know we've received a letter from the mayor of Aurora, Tom Rakis. It's caught on like fire. Over 50, last that he communicated with us, there's over 50 communities that are supporting his motion. So I would like to support it, and it's in regards to dissolving the Ontario Land Tribunal. So I would like my fellow councils to hopefully support me on this, and I know the mayor's in agreement. That council requests the government of Ontario to dissolve the OLT immediately, thereby eliminating one of the most significant sources of red tape, delaying the development of more attainable housing in Ontario and affordable housing, and that a copy of this motion be sent to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Leader of the Opposition, the leaders of the Liberal and Green parties, all MPPs in the province of Ontario, the large urban mayors caucus of Ontario, the small urban GTHA mayors and regional chairs of Ontario, and that a copy of this motion be sent to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, and all Ontario municipalities for their consideration.
Okay, is there anyone who wants to speak to that? Go ahead, Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, completely agree. Great initiative. I think we need to gain, said it for 4 years, we need to gain some form of control in our city where we can make reasonable requests or make reasonable decisions. So I support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sentence. Is there anyone else? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 11B, City of Thorold, mover Councillor DeRose and a seconder, Councillor Sentence. And again, I'll turn this over to Councillor DeRose.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Some of the stuff that's come to my attention of late, I know as a municipality, we don't have a lot of say or control over the topic of guns. But, you know, receiving letters like we did recently from the Solicitor General, Sylvia Jones, province of Ontario, she says, you know, her government, and I know the federal government, they're committed to keeping communities across Ontario safe, supported, and protected. But, you know, actions speak louder than words. I'll give you an example. Just recently, and this is in Niagara, okay, not far. This is right in our backyard, in our front yard. August 12th, a 25-year-old American woman was caught smuggling 12 handguns, and she was given time served 574 days, so about a year and a half. Additionally, a 28-year-old lady from Chicago crossed the Niagara area bridge this past summer with 11 guns. I'm sorry, this was on January, and on January 21st was given a $100 fine. So basically, I'll read my motion that I'm asking for support from council. The council requests that the province and federal government consider imposing stiffer penalties for infractions, sentencing, and consequences relating to the importation, production, or distribution of firearms, and that this motion be forwarded to the provincial and federal governments, the AMO, FCM, and that staff forward this motion to Niagara area municipalities for their consideration and support.
Okay.
Thank you.
Speakers to the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with this motion. If you notice on the news today, a 14-year-old killed an 18-year-old at one of the high schools in Toronto. And over the last few months, if you've noticed, a lot of the guns are being utilized by teenagers, and they're coming from the States. And they're coming from what Councillor DeRose just stated, coming across the border. So I think this is a great motion, and hopefully the government of the day will take serious heed about what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Just a little follow-up on that. Also, you know, in regards to making 3D, now they have the capability of doing a print and getting a gun also on that stuff and put it into an ICI machine, and actually they're capable of making a gun. If you have the necessary machining equipment, all you need is a plan that you can get off the internet and that stuff, and you can produce handguns yourself personally right here in Ontario, and which is probably occurring. That's why they find a lot of handguns without serial numbers or whatever, because they're made on 3D printers. Believe it or not. So they can actually get the schematics and build handguns from using that type of printing system. So I support it also too. We do have gun controls in Canada, but I don't think it's about the rifles or the long guns. It's about handguns. So I totally support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to let Councillor Hanley know it is covered in this motion because it does say the production also, or distribution, and or distribution. So production is there also. You're right. They are making these guns with 3D printers. You're right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. Up next, I have motion to receive and file minutes or adopt recommendations of council boards and committees. I have a mover, Councillor Hanley, seconder, Councillor Longo. That council receive and file the minutes below as presented. Minutes to review for information purposes. That council receive and file the minutes of committees, local boards and council as presented. That's the Town and Gown Age-Friendly Committee, Thorough Runway of Recognition, Darlene Ryan, Port Robinson Community Center, and Heritage Thorold Lackac. Is there any discussion on this? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to just highlight the Thorold Runway of Recognition. We're still accepting applications up until March. So if you want to recommend someone or put someone forward, now's the time to do it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And the application's on the Thorold City website.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Statement by councillors. Councillor Neal, you're up regarding the green cover at Richmond and DQ.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And the piece of property that I'm talking about is at the corner of Richmond and DQ Road. It was a bush, and notice it was a bush next to the regional pumping station, and it's no longer there. And what I have found out since that has happened is that we did have back in 1996 a memorandum that asked the developers not to tear that down. and it's still in existence. I just received information from our former mayor, Malcolm Woodhouse, that he had sent in last October stating his concern about what they were putting around that particular bush. And he sent it into planning staff, and planning staff sent a reply back, said that they would look into it and make sure it wouldn't happen, that wouldn't be destroyed, and it has been destroyed. And so I would like to put a motion forward if I can, Mr. Mayor. And I'll just get the motion in front of me, that the council prepare correspondence to the developers to request they replant the bush that was leveled at the corner of Richmond and DeQ Road in order to create more green cover, and that an additional request for a natural frog pond be created because there was a frog pond there. And we all know from Port Robinson that it is very important to a lot of people that these natural areas stay in place. So that's what I would like to see happen. I think the staff has not done its job in this particular instance, because from the information that I do have, they should have done something, or at least let us know that this was going to happen. So that's the reason why I have a motion forward.
I want to see if staff is there that I can, Sean, can you speak to this, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The work that was done by DG Group as part of their development process. It was done under a site alteration permit issued by the engineering department. The work that was completed to date was the removal of some dead trees. And there is absolutely an intention for them to put back living trees in the same location. The memorandum of understanding that Councillor Neal referred to did refer to the fact that we weren't going to destroy the frog pond, and that is absolutely the intent. I have drawings here of what the frog pond is going to look like after we're done, if I can share my screen and let you see.
Yep, that would be good, please.
So this is the, can you see that on your screen?
Yep, it's up.
Okay, so this area here is the regional pumping station, as Councillor Neal stated. This is a stormwater management pond that will be part of the development of these future phase lands. And this treed area here, you can see all the little trees in there. That is going to be the frog pond area and protected frog area for this application. I hope that answers all your questions.
Is that area right now is cleared, so there will be replanting and the frog area? What can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, they will be, all the trees that are shown on this drawing are new trees to be put in place of the ones that were removed, that were dead as part of most of them died as part of the ash borer problem.
Okay, and I'll go back to our gallery view, and we'll get more people speaking on this. Go ahead, Councillor DeRose, and then Councillor Wilson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the city engineer, Sean. Sean, did they give you a heads up they were doing this, or did they kind of do it on their own? Because I was getting calls from people like Councillor Neal, and I had actually a couple people crying to me. They were so upset because they felt that this was being done without city's knowledge.
No,
So
no,
can
we
you
issued
just
a
shed some
permit.
light?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we issued a permit for it.
Okay, so I don't understand how you could destroy a frog pond, a natural frog pond, and then create one. I don't see how that's possible. But if someone knows more about environmental issues like that, if you could explain it. But is that possible to do that? I figure once you destroy an environmental area, you can try to replace it, but it's never going to be the same.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councillor DeRose that it's never going to be the same, but it'll certainly be an environmental area that will have the ability for frogs to live in it.
Okay.
Is it, Mr. Mayor, just one more question. Is it
Yeah, go
possible
ahead,
to,
go ahead.
I know these things have to be done expeditiously, but is it possible to consult with maybe with council going forward if something like this comes up again? I don't know. The residents were caught off guard and they're very upset. So that's, that's my concern is there was people on board with that since the beginning of when they preserved that area, and to see that happen, they were very disheartened.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can certainly change our communication and post things on our website if that would help.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm very upset about this as well. I got a lot of calls, just like I'm sure other councillors, even from our MP, Jeff Birch, and people outraged about the article that they read in the paper. I'm shocked to hear that we actually issued a permit. This doesn't make any sense to me. If we had a memorandum and we had residential groups that spent money and lawyers trying to preserve this land, why would we issue a permit to destroy it and then later rebuild it? The whole point of preserving it is to maintain the lives of those animals in that area. So if there was dead trees, there's other ways to remove them rather than bulldozing everything and killing everything in its path, only to say, oh, we'll plant some trees and create a space that frogs might want to come back to. That doesn't make any sense. So how is our planning department able to give a permit to a company to do this when we have an agreement in place that says they're not allowed to do that? Why would that happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was done, part of the permit, steps that we went through to issue the permit included a tree inventory, which identified that all the trees were dead by a horticulturalist. And they submitted the plan that you saw about the replanting and the reinitiation of that frog pond, of that area.
Okay, so there's dead trees, but they drove over a pond that had wildlife in it to get rid of dead trees to replant trees later. That doesn't make any sense. Don't we have a process where we have to consult an environmentalist, especially if we have an agreement in place? Like, I would think there should be repercussions for this.
Okay, who would you like the repercussions to be against?
Well, quite frankly, actually, when I came to this meeting and I knew Councillor Neal was bringing this up, I was going to say that we should be creating financial repercussions for the developer. But now it turns out our own city has approved this to happen, which just blows my mind. All of this stuff we're looking at in Port Robinson, turtle ponds, and we've heard reports from about birds and all these types of animals that we're trying to preserve, and we just allowed them to bulldoze an area just to say we're going to replant trees. I'm just really upset. I'm more upset than I was before, because now it's our fault, and it's very upsetting. So I don't know what I'm getting at, but I think something internally from a management standpoint, something needs to happen, because there's no way that our department should be doing this sort of stuff. We just shouldn't be. That permit should never have been issued. So obviously we have some serious issues internally if that's what's happening. If all I have to do is say, yes, there's some animals that we're going to run over because we want an easy way to get rid of trees, but don't worry, we'll replant them. Like, it's just obscene to me. So I'd like to make a friendly amendment, Councillor Neal, if maybe you want to add into your motion an investigation of how we, I don't know how you'd want to word it, but issue permits when it comes to natural habitats, because this should never have been done. I don't know if you can say that in a better way and add that.
Wow.
It's a good idea to add it in. And I'm sure our clerk can probably smooth it a bit to add it into the motion. And I agree. And I'll let Councillor Hanley speak before I speak, but I like to speak again.
Well, you can speak last, okay, Councillor? Your point's well taken, Councillor Wilson. The clerk will work on that, and before we read the final motion, we'll make sure everybody knows what it is. Councillor Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to be inclined. I have to agree with Councillor Wilson here, because one of the things is that it's classified as a chorus frog is there. That's one of the amphibians that was habitats was associated with that piece of property. That's what's not being mentioned here, that there was no regard for the habitat was living there, as Councillor Wilson stated. They lives within the clay. As we know, they hibernate in the winter, but also what also hibernates in areas like that is crayfish, is salamanders, is a significant amount of species. It's not just a frog pond. Frog ponds just aren't there. It's actually a breeding ground for hellgamites that end up turning into dragonflies. So my concern, it's like a total disregard was given for the habitat was living there. I understand, yes, trees were dead, but to send in heavy equipment and that stuff, in regards to what they did to the land, there is no regard whatsoever for what's regarded as the Western chorus amphibian frog. There is no regard for whatever. I know that it's not. I haven't been able to find anything that's endangered, but they did have a report come out in early 2001 and then again in 2008, because I did a little bit of research on it today in regards to it. So the amphibian that was living in that was concerned as a species that whose habitats is ever less. It actually says ongoing losses of habitats and breeding sites for this small frog due to suburban expansion and alteration in practices have resulted in losses of population and isolation from remaining habitat patches. So that kind of spells it out right there to me, that there was an amphibian there that, even though it wasn't endangered, that its habitat was decreasing significantly because of urban expansion, so on and so forth. And there was a total disregard for that. So that's my big concern here. And I agree with Councillor Wilson, for the city to be issuing a permit, knowing that there's a letter of memorandum, and reading the article myself today, I can't believe the city actually give a permit and allowed this to occur, knowing that the fight that was put in there through Carl Carlson and the rest of the organizers back in that day, I remember it significantly. So that's all I have. What council wants to do is we'll decide as a group.
Thank you, Councillor Hanley. Councillor Kenny, and then Councillor Longo.
Yeah, I just like to say, I'm not a frog expert. I don't know anything about them. My bigger problem here is the process that was followed. It was mentioned that there was something in place that this was not supposed to happen, whatever it was, whether it was a frog pond or a splash pad. At the end of the day, that was not supposed to happen, and it did happen, and a permit was issued. So I think we have to take a good look at the process as well.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Councillor Longo, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I'd expand on what Councillor Kenny said. I do agree with Councillor Wilson. The developer knows better, and internally we should have done a better job. We need to find out why this happened and make sure it never happens again, because this is embarrassing from an environmental standpoint and for a city. So hopefully we look into this and make sure it never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I remember this when it came up back in the day, and it was a big deal, and they fought hard and spent a lot of time. So I'll echo what Councillor Longo said there. We have to look into this so it doesn't happen again. So I'll support your motions. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Decker. Yeah, I got you, Councillor Neal. You're last, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Wilson, and I will support the motion that we need to do a better job at investigating when we're going to do work in these environmental areas.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just summing up DQ Road and the natural areas along it are different parks and conservation areas along that roadway. This should never have happened. I'm just, because former Mayor Woodhouse sent me correspondence he sent in October 28th last year that he had concerns that there was a barrier around this particular piece of property. And he sent it in, and planning staff sent back, thanks for your email. I've had a chance to look into this and discuss it with engineering staff. There is a condition in the subdivision agreement that requires the protection of the natural areas you have mentioned. Engineering staff copied on this email have advised that at this point, they are only aware of dirt being moved. The appropriate and required protections will be put in place prior to any development of that subdivision and of the city's lands you've mentioned. So therefore, I agree with the motion that we want to put forward. I think we have to look into it, not just for this specific development, but to make sure this doesn't happen again, because it's happened a couple of places in Niagara Falls. And I don't want it to happen in a bigger area than what we're talking about right now. So I agree with the motion that we're putting forward.
Okay, Counselor, and we have the motion, and we have, there was an amendment, Counselor Hyde, to our city clerk, Joanne Hyde, if you could read the amended motion, please.
Sure, through the mayor to members of council. First, we do need a seconder for that motion, but I'll read it.
I got Counselor Wilson as the seconder.
Perfect, thank you. So what I've added is that council request an internal review of the standard operating procedure relating to the environmental permitting process to be completed and reported back to council. Does that capture what you're looking for, Councilor Neo Council?
Is that captured?
We want to make sure that the developers put everything back into place again.
No.
And I know that
That's a different part
Sean
of the motion.
did give us, or look, we had looked at it, what they were going to do, but maybe they need to do more than just what was on that diagram.
No, but this is, that was just the amendment. The other part of the motion's still there, Counselor Neal.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. Counselor Hanley, did you want to speak?
Sure, I did. We definitely did, Mr. Mayor, because I could believe, we also had an issue just recently with a development that was helped in Port Robinson West. They leveled some trees out there and took down some forested area that they weren't supposed to. I believe we also had some issues with a development in Allenburg that we proposed at the end of Center Street on the right-hand side by the Welland Canal, where there was some taking down of trees, whatever, and leveling of property there without getting the proper permits. So it's happened more than once. It's like a continuous thing that these developers move in, we set the way it's supposed to be done, they ignore us totally, and there's no staff there or anybody to do a follow-up to see that they're actually following through what they're committed to do. I know of 3 incidents probably within the last 2 years, if not 18 months.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Wilson, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to also mention and maybe I'm adding another friendly amendment for Councillor Neal, but that they not only put it back in place, but they also get some assistance from an environmentalist to see if they can reintroduce those special types of frogs to that area. So I guess I just don't want to see them planting trees and hoping that the frogs that they killed come back. They need to find a way to reintroduce them into that habitat. So that was my one. And the second thing is, I'm wondering if that's part of that, just because we are the fastest growing city. I think it said in Canada, this report that I read the other day.
No, it's not.
I'm wondering if also we could have in that staff report, staff find out if we can have financial repercussions for the developers that are doing these things that Councillor Hanley mentioned, right? So if they're not following the rules and they're wiping out some trees or some areas they're not supposed to outside of this situation, then if there's some sort of fine or financial repercussion that we have, because I think it's important, we're growing so much. So if we don't make a statement to show that we're serious when we say this is what you can do, and this is as far as you can go, that it's just going to keep happening.
So I think what you should ask for is, this is the motion, but you should ask for a detailed staff report back on our whole policies and procedures is relating to this.
Yes, which is the
rather
motion,
than-
but I'm
I don't
asking
think
if they,
that
in
you want-
addition to that, they can look at if we're able to put financial repercussions.
Well, the staff, you can ask for a staff report, a detailed staff report back, dealing with, how can I say it, to the clerk, of the whole, policy?
Financial ramifications.
So that would be a separate,
Sorry.
are you
That's
saying that would
separate,
be a
yeah.
separate one, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, that's a separate request for a staff report. Would I-
Okay. So where would we do that?
We can do that right when we're done then.
Okay. So sorry, so would Counselor Neal add into his portion that they look at the help of environmentalists to reintroduce the frogs and salamanders into that area?
Yeah, I think maybe the staff report would handle that. Or else we'll keep on going on a motion. I think I agree with you that should happen, but maybe it doesn't need a motion for that to happen. That the staff are quite aware now that what they have to do.
Yeah, we're just gonna we'll get a detailed staff report dealing with all these items. But the motion is, so let's do the motion now. So the motion is exactly as it is here, and then with the addition of the third, can we read the whole motion that, what I have here is that council prepare correspondence to the developers, to request they replant the bush that was leveled at the corner of Richmond and DQ Road in order to create more green cover, and that an additional request for the natural frog pond be created. And then there was a third part, and I'll ask our city clerk to read that.
Sure, through the mayor to members of council, the third clause was that council request an internal review of the standard operating procedure relating to the environmental permitting process to be completed and reported back to council.
Okay. And would that encompass everything we've talked about to the clerk? So I don't think we keep needing to add. That can add, will that encompass everything that was raised?
Yeah, through the mayor to members of council, when you're looking at a internal review of a standard operating procedure, that standard operating procedure would usually encompass everything. So whether it be fines associated with a permit or not following a permit, it would encapsulate everything that you're looking for.
Okay, is everybody good with that? Okay, so now we have that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. Very good discussion. And now I have Councillor Hanley on COVID-19 regulations. Is that correct, Councillor?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Actually, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna pause on that because of what the province had released in that stuff, and I was just gonna comment on regards to the regulations, but I'm gonna take a hiatus on that right now, and I'm gonna wait till notices of motion, and I'm gonna put a notice of motion forward.
Thank you, Councillor.
You're welcome.
There's no delegations. Consent reports. I have a mover, Councillor Decker, seconder, Councillor Wilson, that council approve items 15A to 15I as presented. Are we pulling any of these reports? Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to discuss, you left out J was added recently, but I'd like to discuss
15J.
H and J.
It is J in my report, sorry. It is, yeah.
Yeah, so can I pull H and J?
You sure can.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're going to approve 15A, we're gonna approve 15A, 15B, 15C, 15D, 15E, 15F, 15G, 15I. And we've pulled 15H and 15J, okay? And a mover, Councillor Decker, and a seconder, Councillor Wilson. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, so we're gonna start with 15H, and that is amendments to administrative monetary penalty bylaw. And I will turn that over to our Chief Building Official, Jason Simpson.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the recommendations of this report are that council receive Planning and Development Services Report PDS 2022-04, and that council approve bylaw 05-2022 to amend bylaw 148-2019, being the administrative penalty bylaw. And that concludes the recommendations of this report.
Okay, and Councillor DeRoche, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Yeah, Jason, well done. Very thorough report. I agree with everything you've done there. The only thing I don't agree with is the original intent of my motion of late was to increase the, to kind of set a deterrent for the residential licensing bylaw. And not to be critical, but so we've gone from 500 to 700 for not reporting that you've got a rental, which is a 40% increase. But then, you know, there's other ones that went up 100%. The one of do with the swimming pool, enclosing a swimming pool went up 230%. So I just, is there any way I would accept everything you've got there, but can we go back to the drawing board and make the rental bylaw fine a little steeper and more conducive to changing behavior? 500 to 700, when these guys are making, they can put 6 to 8 bedrooms in these places, they're making a killing. And I don't think they deserve the leniency of our council or staff at $700. To me is a pittance. So is there, I'll leave it open for discussion with other councilors, but I definitely would like to see, that's the one I would have liked to see increased a couple 100% instead of, you know, some of the other clean yard waste 50% higher. If your fence is too high, that's going up 100%. So I think this is a more serious issue at this point in our city's history. And I'd like to see people that aren't going to follow the residential rental license bylaw to be punished more severely than just $700. And I accept any comments from my fellow councilors and you, Jason, again. Thank you.
I'll let Jason speak to that. Go ahead, Jason. As to why you only went to 7 and not higher.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor DeRose. The Municipal Act identifies that administrative penalties, which is what these are not to be punitive in nature, but they are to still act as a deterrent to encourage compliance with the bylaws. Council does have the authority and the ability to increase that penalty to whatever they feel is appropriate. I raised it to 700 because I felt that it was enough of an increase that would still act as a deterrent without being too punitive in nature, knowing that we also have other tools where we could actually increase the the frequency of issuing these penalties more so than we do now as well, in lieu of one big penalty on the first shot.
Thank you, Jason. Does anyone else want to speak to that? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just stick to the residential rental. To Mr. Simpson, so what I'm gathering is there'd be a stepped increase in enforcement. Is that what you're saying?
So the penalties, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Longo, the penalty would remain the same. However, we have the authority to issue these penalties every day should we feel it's appropriate. Right now, honestly, just due to resources, we don't issue these penalties very often. Although it's looked like when I provided a report previously, we had issued 200 penalties in the previous year. We could have realistically probably tripled that if we had the time to do so. So what I would like to do is talk with staff, work on our processes, and if needed, increase the frequency to which we are issuing these penalties rather than giving people who are in non-compliance months upon months to comply, which is the practice that we have right now. We're trying to work with people as much as we can to bring them into compliance. But if council has the desire for us to take a more forceful approach, we absolutely can do that. So you have two options before you, really, is increasing the penalties so that it is a much higher penalty rate from the start, whether it's a first time or not, or leaving the penalties as proposed. And if the penalty doesn't act as a deterrent or an encouragement to comply, then we will issue the penalties more often until compliance is achieved.
Go ahead, Councilor Longo.
So thank you for that answer. So there is no way to have, for example, on this, a $700 penalty for a first offense and then increase it if they don't become compliant? Is the 700 the maximum amount we could do?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no. A stepped penalty system is definitely something that could be done. And I did mention or speak to that a little bit in the report. The reason I was not proposing a stepped penalty system with any of the bylaws at this point in time is because we try to take the approach that we give people the opportunity to comply first before we issue any penalties. And if they don't comply within the time frame we set out for them, then we will issue the penalties. A stepped approach is more, it would work better for residential rental licensing, I suppose, because there's more people who still don't come into compliance even after issuing a first penalty, unlike other bylaws where if they don't comply with it after we issue the first penalty, we'll just go in and bring it into compliance. Obviously, we can't do that with a residential rental bylaw. So I would say that if a stepped penalty system is appropriate for any bylaw, it's probably the residential rental licensing bylaw. But I figured just increasing the penalty and potentially increasing the frequency of issuing those penalties would be a more phased in approach to enforcement as opposed to coming down with a really heavy hammer. But if council feels that it's more appropriate that we do that, that is definitely at council's discretion.
Okay, thank you for that. And one more question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Simpson. I was speaking to a resident regarding residential rental licensing, and I mentioned that we had $100,000, I believe that's the number, in fines given out last year. Does the city of Thorold receive the entire amount of those administrative penalties? Or is this, could you explain how that works?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Longo, yes, the city of Thorold does receive 100% of those administrative penalties, unlike what we see with provincial offenses fines. One of the benefits to municipalities of going with the administrative penalties is the municipality receives 100% of the penalty. So, and those, the director of finance may be able to correct me if I'm incorrect here, but I believe those revenues are used to offset the operating budget for the division in order to reduce the burden on the taxes.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that answer, because I guess the conversation I had was when it's a provincial offense, the city may not get all the money, but if in fact this isn't a provincial offense, then I guess we receive it all. Maybe if the director of finance could confirm that, I'd appreciate it.
Yep, Maria, go ahead. Maria.
Certainly. Through Mr. Mayor, as Mr. Simpson indicated, yes, for the amps, it does flow into a reduction to our levy, as opposed to a provincial offenses fine, which it's a 50-50 share with the region and the local area municipalities. And then the local area municipal is then based on your share of the assessment base. So your proportionate share, so we would end up with maybe 5-6%.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to the Director of Finance, just so I understand this, and I'm trying to stay on topic here. So a provincial offense like a traffic fine in the city of Thorold, we would maybe get 5 or 6%, whereas with residential licensing, we get 100%?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, I'll support our staff's report as is, for the reason that I think in Councillor DeRose's example where the 6-bedroom places that are being rented out by out-of-town people or owned by out-of-town people, this bylaw doesn't really address that. Those guys are all paying their $500, and so we're not chasing those particular people. So I'll support this as it is.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to that? So basically, where is Councillor DeRose? Are you willing to leave it as is, or do you want to make a motion, or do you want?
You know what? I would like staff to just have a look at that one to come up with maybe a more aggressive approach. Just that one. The rest are fine.
So
if my fellow councilors support me, but yeah, I'd like them to go back to the drawing board for that one. Even if it's a bit more, but I just think 700 is not a deterrent. And I disagree with Councillor Kenny's comment that the people that are from out of town that have 6 bedrooms have all, I've got a list that I'm ready to hand in to Jason any day now. So that fact is not true. Thank you.
So if we pass it as is, then Jason, can you still reevaluate that one and come back? Or I just want to make sure that.
Certainly, I could, if council chooses to pass it as is this evening, I can certainly come back with another amendment based on a review of just the residential rental licensing penalties.
Thank you. Councillor Longo, you had your hand up. Is that what you were going to ask? Or?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm fine with that. I was going to kind of suggest the same thing. I think we should have a step system in place just for residential licensing because we need to have a deterrent in place. But I would happily pass it the way it is with a follow-up report.
Thank you. And that's another good thing, and Jason, that you could look at just for residential is the stepped up, because that may be a good place to utilize that. Is there anyone else? Okay. Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, 15J, PWCS 2022 Canada Games Park Project Update Report. I have a mover, Councillor Decker, and a seconder, Councillor Wilson. And the one we just passed again was moved by Councillor Decker and seconded Councillor Wilson. All these reports are. Go ahead to our Director of Public Works and Community Services, Jeff Holman.
Mr. Mayor, the report is to receive the report for, the recommendation is to receive the report for information. And it's basically in response to a number of questions that we had directed towards Canada Games Park. And I'm happy to answer anything that is on councillors' minds at the time.
Thank you. Councillor DeRose.
Yeah, 3, Mr. Mayor. The Director of Operations. Yeah, thank you. You know what? I'd like to, if we can continue to get these, like when they come out, just because I think Councillor Hanley said recently, or can't remember who it was, but I don't have a lot of time, spare time. So for me to search it on the website or the city website or the Canada Summer Games website. So I appreciate us getting this. It was good. I went through the whole thing. So I just had a couple questions. I have one comment. I was a little disappointed that of all the 34 firms that were involved in building and putting together the Canada Summer Games, they only utilized 2 from Thorold, but you know, most of them were from Toronto, but that's fine. I just wanted to, it kind of bothered me a bit. The other thing is just a question, Jeff, on attachment 4. there's an amendment there. And it says, number 3, gross budget be increased 1,250,000 to be funded from the external funding in bracket sponsorship revenue. So I just wanted to know, can you just reiterate on how the sponsorship's going? Because I know with COVID, I just don't know where you guys are at with this sponsorship, because that's a big chunk of money. And my second question would be, if we don't get that in sponsorship revenue, does that fall on the region, or does that fall on our operating 1/3 partnership?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, good questions. The sponsorship committee has been working closely with a firm that was hired, Lang Communications. Their objective, their goal, as identified in the pro forma, was to try and raise approximately $6 million in sponsorship revenue, and I believe they're pretty close to that. I don't know for sure exactly the final details when all the announcements are going to be made, probably in the next couple of weeks. But any shortfall that's not achieved there will be assumed by the region of Niagara as part of their commitment to the project.
Okay, so there's no numbers yet as to how well securing these sponsorships is at right now, correct?
Well, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. There is one announcement has been made with respect to Walker family contribution towards naming rights. We can expect some in the next couple of weeks from some significant players, but the confidentiality is arrangements and agreements are still in place until those announcements can be made. But I can tell you that we're pretty close to the target.
Okay, yeah, and that was my next question was about the 6 million, the 5,400,000 that they're looking at securing. Okay, and if we can keep receiving these, I'd be really appreciative. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. I appreciate Mr. Holman, the information. Answered some of my questions, which is good, and I'm sure more will get answered in the future. I just have a question on attachment 3. It's the Thorold Community Arena Transition Proposal. Not sure if you can help me with that, but I've had a couple calls from some user groups. Are they to contact the city to, I guess, get in line with which facility they are going to use when things open back up in September?
Yeah, thanks. This is a good question, Mr. Mayor. And so we're trying to get out in front of this by working with the user groups. And I'll ask Curtis Dray to speak about the game plan here, but the intent is to try and confirm what the ice time allocation policy should be with the users, so that we can, when it comes to making ice time available at either the Frank Doherty Arena or the Canada Games Park, that they would have the opportunity first, I guess, on a priority basis to determine what their utilization is going to be. And I'll hand it over to Curtis, because he can explain how we've taken it through the Parks, Recreation and Trails Committee.
Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we have an existing policy that there was some language in it that was a little bit vague. So what we did is we took the Parks, Trails, Rec Committee to essentially drill down in some of that language and clarify what a partnership group was and what that actually meant. We can say partnership group, but that can incorporate numerous different groups based on the classification that we had in there. So we took it to the Parks, Trails, Rec Committee and said, what's important here based on their opinion from an unbiased approach. And some of the items that came up were longevity of rental agreements, not-for-profit status, youth, Thorold residents playing on these teams. So that's essentially the approach we're taking, is based on the policy that was already in place. We drilled down a little bit further to say, in those categories, what should be the sort of the next pin down point to classify who should go where or get a selection of where they go. So that's essentially what you're looking at in front of you. After tonight, assuming council approves that, that will go to the user groups. They can then reach out to city staff to have a conversation with us about any questions they may have around that in the process. But we're essentially looking to get approval in that concept tonight to take that out to the permit holders.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. So basically, depending on their tier, I guess, 1, 2, or 3. So tier 1 would be priority. They would get to choose the location and the time that they would want to use.
Through
Not
you,
being
Mr. Mayor.
guaranteed it, but they could put a request in for it.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, that answers the question for the few people who contacted me. I guess my only other question, Mr. Holman, and I'm not sure if you can answer. I know we have what's called substantial completion. So when will we be able to go in the door? Does anybody know that yet?
Short answer is no. I think we could expect something between, Family Day and March break, that there would be announcements about a grand opening. Some of it has to do with the restrictions that the province is putting in place with respect to capacity. Some of it has to do with the getting the independent operator on board and getting them familiar with how the systems run and how they get coordinated. And then, unfortunately, the other part of it is coordinating with some of our other funding partners and making arrangements for tours and some of the more preparations for a grand opening. I would like to say as soon as possible, but I don't have a date, but I think it's reasonable to expect something between mid-February and mid-March.
Okay, thank you. And again, I appreciate you answering the questions. I appreciate the report. And like Councillor DeRose said, any updates we can get along the way would be beneficial for council and the public, I think. Thank you.
Absolutely. I got Councillor Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the appropriate staff member, have we or do we have the numbers as to what amount of ice time will be subsidized at the facility? I see that we have 52 hours, and depending on, you're going to do your analysis. Does the analysis has to be done before we can get a figure as to how much the taxpayers of Thorold will have to subsidize the ice there for user groups?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that's one of the questions everybody is anxious to know, just exactly what it's going to cost. So part of the exercise will involve the ice time allocation process. It's okay to say you want to have the time allocated to you, but it's another thing to commit to paying for it. And so that's what we're trying to sort out now. And once we get to that situation, we'll be able to understand what the schedule is going to be and how we can, if we do have surplus time, then we can share it with our partners. And likewise, if we need additional time, we can work with them to schedule around it. The way the pro forma was set up was that Brock would receive a certain amount of time for their varsity program, and the balance of the time would be split evenly between the City of St. Catharines and the City of Thorold. So there's enough allocation there. It's just a matter of committing a particular group to a particular time during a particular time of the year. And those are the types of things we would work out in the facility operating plan, which we're going to do once we get our independent operator on board. It's a work in progress, Councillor Handley. It's the best I can tell you at the moment.
Councillor, you're muted. Councillor, you're muted. Councillor Hanley.
Thank you. In regards to, just to follow up on that, in regards to the costing, seeing that it's a partnership agreement, we all be paying the same amount. Do we have an actual dollar figure of what non-subsidized ICE users may be looking at paying? Do we have it? Is it $2.25 an hour, $2.50 an hour, $2.75? Do we have anything in that yet? Or that's still up in the air?
So that'll be something that will come back to you once we confirm what the allocation is going to be. We need to look at historically how much the city's been subsidizing user groups. And I know that in the past, there have been some disparity between user groups and subsidies. That's why the ice time allocation policy is important, because it gives those user groups the opportunity to say, yes, I want the ice, or no, I don't. With respect to the cost, we're going to stick with, I think, the original number that was in the pro forma. There's a certain rate for prime time, certain for non-prime time. But at the moment, it's different from what we currently charge at Doherty. So as part of this exercise to come back, we'll be looking at a rates and fee schedule that we'll be able to apply. And that will have the analysis that you're looking for, Councillor Handley, on how much the taxpayers of the community are contributing towards to offset the actual operating costs of running an ice rink.
Thank you very much. Just one more question, Mr. Mayor. In regards to the same thing with the transition proposal, I see in tier 2, it has at the bottom, the registered junior A, junior B, double A. Are we looking at using taxpayers, City of Thorold's taxpayers' monies for ice, basically for a building to subsidize, or are we going to lose ice time out to a junior A affiliate team? Is that the intention here, to rent ice time to the junior A? That would be the Niagara Ice Dogs being the closest affiliate. Is that the intention here?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it is, but I'll ask Curtis if he could perhaps answer your question.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, the intention there was to capture the current junior B team.
Okay, it's just that it says registered junior A, junior B in the report that's before us. So I'm concerning that, I don't want us having the junior A team now come in and bump out or go through Brock University because they have bumping rights, and gives them the ability to bump a Thorold user group out when the taxpayers of Thorold have been the ones that have coughed up the money for the facility. That's my concern.
I think, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Handley, I think the intent was here to protect in the event that there might be a junior A team in the city, but it's certainly focused on the junior clubs that already exist.
Thank you.
Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, I'd just like to say at the last meeting, it was also discussed that before the opening, there's going to be tours for both St. Catharines and Thorold City Councils and mayors to go through the complex. And we also mentioned that there should probably be tours for the public down the road too, because I mean, it's no good if people just wander out there and walk around and look around. I mean, it's all right to, but we mentioned that maybe they might want to get a tour of the place once it is open, so that everybody can go through and formally get a look at it.
Thank you. Good point. Councillor DeRose.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jeff. I just wanted to know, are they, how soon is it going to be user ready for any user groups? Because I was surprised, a couple kids in my class today said they had a game tonight in the old barn. And I wasn't even aware that the ice was still in the old arena, but at this point of the year. So obviously they can't play there yet, correct? It's not ready to be used at this time by Thorold athletes.
No, it's not available for rent at the moment.
Okay. Any further questions?
Okay, thank you.
Seeing none, I had a mover, Councillor Decker, seconder, Councillor Wilson. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Discussion reports. CC 2022-14 letter of municipal significance for the Junior B Blackhawks home games. I got a mover, Councillor Longo, seconder, Councillor Neal, and I will turn this over to our city clerk. Joanne, go ahead.
Sorry. Through the mayor to members of council, the recommendation for this report, it's just coming back to council following the lifting of the restrictions that council declared the Thorold Junior B Blackhawk home games a municipally significant event, and that the following home game dates be included in the event: February 21st and 28th, March 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, and that the home game playoff dates are to be determined and a subsequent report to follow, and that Roberto Pulido shall be responsible for complying with all conditions imposed by the AGCO.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I am totally opposed to this, being on the Regional Road Safety Committee and the Active Transportation Committee. I've discussed this with Paul Webb, in charge of traffic safety, Sergeant in charge of traffic safety for the region. Talked to Mad out of Oakville. I totally do not think this is a necessity for the city of Thorold. On a Monday night, we don't need people leaving the arena. That might be, I don't know, a couple beers, maybe more. I don't know. But you can't be at a hockey game for 2 hours and not be able to go without a beer. I think it's totally ridiculous. I won't support this. I'm asking my fellow councilors to support my intention to not allow this for this year. I just think it's putting our community at risk and in danger. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kenny, did you have your hand up? It's still up, or is that from before?
No, I put my hand up. I'm going to support this. We're starting to open things up in Ontario. We've got adults going to the game. There's nothing wrong with an adult having a beer in between periods. And just like they could go anywhere else and drink, they have to know when it's time to leave and time to drive, and if they should drive or not. But when an adult goes to a hockey game, there's nothing wrong with it's at the Thorold Arena or at Garden City Arena or in Toronto at a ball game. There's nothing wrong with having a beer and watching a hockey game.
Thank you. Councillor Decker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll support it as well. I've been to Garden City Arena, and they've had beer there, and I think it gets cut off after the second period. And we're talking about adults here, so I think it's a great idea. Maybe it'll bring more people out to the games for attendance. So, and it's only for another month or two, so I'll support it. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Councillor Sentence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this can be done safely. I'll support it. I've seen it at many arenas. If we have Canada Day celebrations, people come to Canada Day, they have some beers, and then they leave. If it's done right, you have to have your smart serve, and they still have to go through the liquor board to satisfy all their issues. So I'll support this. I think it's a good thing down there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I guess I'll ask the CAO. I'm concerned about liability here. Does the city have any liability at all if we would allow this?
Through Mr. Mayor, I don't think so. If we are issuing the permit, the liability is on the user group or the person who is taking it. So I don't think so we are taking any liability from that standpoint. That's my understanding, and I will refer it to clerk if I think that's my understanding. But if you think there is something different, please let council know. Thank you.
Joanne?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would really like to know a definite answer because it is a city facility. I know we give these letter of municipal significance to other activities, but they're groups in other areas. So I'm concerned. What I remember once when getting training at the beginning of a council term was a lawyer told us, and I'm not sure how accurate it is, but if the municipality is 1% responsible for an issue, they'll be 100% liable for payment. So I think we really need to know the answer. Is it yes or is it no? And that's my concern here. And I just make a point or a comment regarding this. You know, I know it's adults coming to watch, but we need to remember that the vast majority of the players on the ice are probably underage. So I'm not sure what kind of message we're sending that we need alcohol at sporting events where they're underage athletes. Why not have it for hockey school? You know, I know there is a difference, but like Councilor DeRose said, it's a city facility. It's a 2-hour game. Is it really necessary? And especially if there's a financial risk to the city of Thorold.
Thank you. To our clerk, did you want to comment on that as their permit?
Sure. So through the mayor to members of council, normally when there is a application that's completed and submitted to the AGCO, there are a number of restrictions that they do have to follow. So normally what happens is when there is an event, and this could also take place in a public space, let's say for a wedding or for a concert. When there is alcohol to be sold, there is a rigorous process that a applicant has to go through when they are submitting it to the AGCO. I think that at any time, municipalities specifically could always be potentially named in a lawsuit. That's something that is a risk that we take, and it's pretty much guaranteed, I think, if anything were to happen, just because municipalities are seen to have the pockets to be able to afford or be part of the liability. Having said that, there is a process that they go through with the AGCO. My understanding is that when there is a event that takes place on any municipal roads or on any event space, the applicant should always be providing the AGCO with liability insurance.
Curtis, did you want to comment on that? Because I thought that was mandatory that they had to have insurance, but
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So essentially, yes, the insurance premiums do go up based on the type of event. So anything with alcohol, the premiums would be increased. But to the clerk's point, we're essentially mitigating the exposure, if you will. So yes, we could be named in any lawsuit at any time. So there's no guarantees that we're off the hook per se, but we're mitigating the risk by having increased insurance. But somebody walking down the sidewalk trips down on the sidewalk, again, we could be named even if we've done our homework. So it really just depends on the circumstances around it. We're not off the hook, so to speak. If something ever did happen, we could be named. Yes.
thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, I support it. Seeing that, I know there's underage kids there. It's an adult setting, no watching that stuff. People are trying to, raise funds and that stuff, but everybody's gotten a significant hit. So I'm one. Let's give them a shot. Trial basis, maybe in the report. The only thing I would like to be changed is in the report. It has a start serving time, but it doesn't have an end serving time. And had been mentioned by Councillor Decker, usually at the end of the second period, whatever I know that it is, that alcohol has to cease to be served. And maybe we need to put in some type of stipulation such as that to give ourselves a little bit more assurance and alleviate some of the liability. So I think we need to have a start time and a end time, and the end time shall be at the start of the third period, so that they're allowed to use the first intermission, the second intermission, start of the third period, alcohol sales end.
Okay, can we add that to
Can we
that?
put that in as a friendly amendment to the motion?
Sure, through the mayor to members of council. So what I'll do is where we have the dates, February 21st, 28th, March 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, I'll include that alcohol or seize the sale of alcohol at the start of the third period.
Okay, is everybody good with that? Because I had a mover, Councillor Longo, and a seconder, Councillor Neal. Are you good with that amendment? Is that a friendly amendment? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
I'm not voting for it, Mr. Mayor, so you can, maybe somebody else will move it.
Okay, I got a mover, Councillor Kenny. Okay, are you good with that amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
You, Mr. Mayor, I just want to make a point. Guys, fellow councilors, there's a lot, like most of the crowd at these games are children and teens. So I just think it's a terrible place to be serving beer. Hasn't been done in Thorold. The liability should scare the you-know-what out of you, and it does out of me. I will not support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So the motion's on the floor. Mover Counselor Kenny, seconded Counselor Neal, with the amendment that alcohol consumption is ceased at the beginning of the third period. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. DF 2022-04 Municipal Modernization Program, MP number 3, Approval and Building Department Digitalization. I have a mover, Counselor Decker, and a seconder, Counselor Hanley, and I'll turn this over to our Director of Finance, Maria Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have our manager, Kate Hanna, with us this evening. As the author of the report, she will be presenting.
Thank you. Kate, welcome. You're muted, Kate. Kate, you're muted. We can't hear you. No, she's there. We can hear you, but barely now. Your volume needs to go up. Here we are. What?
Are that council approved the vehicle and equipment utilization review to a maximum of $152,640, HST excluded, funded 100% by the Municipal Modernization Program number 3. That council approved the Records Management Modernization Project to a maximum.
Can't hear her, Mr. Mayor.
No, Kate, we can't. You're echoing and you're broken up.
Maria, Mr. Mayor, perhaps I can read the recommendations.
Yeah, okay. It's just that her
Yes.
audio, there's something wrong with her audio, Kate's audio.
Okay. The recommendations are that council approve the vehicle and equipment utilization review to a maximum of $152,640, HST excluded, funded 100% by the MMP3. Secondly, that council approve the Records Management Modernization Project to a maximum of $207,590,000, HST excluded, funded 65% from the grant and 35% by the city, or $72,656 from the Municipal Development Reserve. That staff also proceed with the digitization of the building division records to a maximum of $80,000 as budgeted for 2022 and funded by the building reserve. Fourthly, that staff utilize the purchase by negotiation method as permitted by policy 300-01, procurement purchasing policy, appendix C2 and appendix C10, for the records management modernization and digitization of the building division records capital projects. Fifthly, that the City of Thorold enter into an agreement with Image Advantage, Inc. for the records management modernization project up to an amount of $207,590. Sixthly, that the city enter into an agreement with Image Advantage, Inc. for the digitization of the building division records up to an amount of $80,000. And lastly, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the necessary agreement. And that concludes the recommendations.
And those include the funding that we received from the government. Am I correct, Maria?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is there any questions to finance on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. FE 2022-01, Fire Stations and Equipment Noise Measurements. I have a mover, Councillor Wilson, and a seconder, Councillor Sentence. And I'll turn this over to our Fire Chief, Terry Dixon. Chief Dixon, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to council, staff recommends 1, that council approve funding up to the amount of $4,300 HST excluded from the encumbrances reserves for the noise measurements for all stations and applicable equipment, and 2, that the testing be awarded to Ontario Environmental and Safety Network Limited.
Okay, is there any questions for our chief? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. And PWCS 2022-12 Recreational Trail Bylaw. I have a mover, Councillor DeRose, seconder, Councillor Kenny, and I'll turn this over to our Director of Public Works and Community Services, Jeff Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a follow-up from the report that was tabled at the February 1st meeting. The recommendation is that Council of the City of Thorold review and approve the proposed recreational trail bylaw as presented.
Okay, and I see in there that Councillor Neal's questions were answered, but I see you had your hand up, Councillor Neal, so go ahead.
I just want to thank Curtis for changing and correcting a couple of those situations.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Notices of motion. Councillor Hanley, you said you had a notice of motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, maybe I could, through you to the President, to clarify. Either a notice of motion or a reconsideration. It's in regards to the mandated, the policy we have in the City of Thorold in regards to testing for COVID-19. I actually supported it, knowing that in the future I could come back to do a reconsideration. So I don't know if I need to put a motion forward a reconsideration, only because, Mr. Mayor, in light of of some information that I've received in regards to even our the Premier, even today I could just tell you that he had stated these were his exact words at a news conference today at a steel mill in Hamilton. And it concerns me that he believes that the tide's ending, and I think we need to change too. And he actually said you can go to Costco, you can go to Walmart. You don't know if the person beside you has a shot or not. We also know it doesn't matter if you have 1 shot or 10 shots, you can.
Councillor Hanley, you're muted. You must have hit the mute button.
Oh, sorry.
So what?
So I said you can go to Costco, you can go to, these are the words of the Premier. That's why I think we need to change the route we're going in the city. He said today, you can go to Costco, you can go to Walmart. You don't know if the person beside you has a shot or not. We also know it doesn't matter if you have 1 shot or 10 shots, you can catch COVID. I know hundreds of people with 3 shots, the Prime Minister, and caught COVID. We need to wash hands, we need to be careful. We can't stay with this forever. We need to learn to move on and get on with our lives, unvaccinated or vaccinated. And I will send that to all the councillors if they don't get to see it prior to the next meeting. And I'm wanting to put a notice of motion forward or reconsideration in regards to the city's policy in regards to employees having to test and pay for it out of their own pockets.
Leave it. I have to ask the clerk, would that be a reconsideration?
Sure, through the
I
mayor
did
to
vote
members
for
of,
it.
through the mayor to members of council, what we'll do is we'll work with Councillor Hanley to get the reconsideration under a motion of support for the next meeting. So that way we can follow through that process of requesting a 2/3 vote to reopen the discussion with regards to that policy.
And get everything put together. Okay, Councillor Hanley.
Okay,
And
well, here's the catch though. So I'm gonna have to do that through you, Mr. Mayor, because I'm not allowed to have contact with staff.
Absolutely, you send it.
So you're gonna have to be my liaison, so we're gonna have to go back and forth and, because I won't be able to talk to them
you
directly.
work with me and I'll make sure it gets forwarded, and then we'll keep communicating until we got it right.
So, just so I could, Mr. Mayor, for clarification, do you want me to write something first, send it to you, forward it to the appropriate staff member? Or will I receive something and get the wording from the motion that council passed in regards to the testing, so I can modify it so it can be reconsidered?
I would say
you have to be the middleman here.
I know, I got it. So can you do that to our clerk? Send me something and then I'll forward it to Councillor Hanley, and then we'll go back and forth until we got it right. We'll make sure it gets looked after, Councillor Hanley. Okay, so I'll wait.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll wait for the clerk to send something to me and that'll start the process, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bylaws. First reading of the bylaws, mover Councillor Hanley and seconded Councillor Sentence that leave be given to introduce the following bylaws. Bylaw 17-2022, bylaw 18-2022, and bylaw 19-2022, and that the same now be read a first time. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Final reading of the bylaws. Mover Councillor Hanley, second Councillor Sentence that the bylaws just read a first time be read a second and third time and do pass, and that the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same. Any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, can't we discuss one of those? Or can we ask questions about one of those before they're passed? I thought we were able to discuss it
Well,
if we had to.
The bylaw, I'll turn it over to the clerk.
Sorry, through mayor to members of council, bylaws are not debatable. If is there a question with regards to clarification, Councillor DeRose?
Yeah, yes, 100%.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't understand how we had the appointment of hearing officers, but now there's an amendment to it, because if you look at it, it says number 1, that Appendix A be amended to include Joanne Hyde, City Clerk. So I'm just wondering where that came from and why we weren't kind of able to talk about that. I just wanted to know the justification for that. Why? So in other words, this bylaw was changed and I didn't know about it. Anybody else know about it?
I'll ask our city clerk. Go ahead.
Sure. Through the mayor to members of council, there was a report that went to council on December 21st, I believe, when we were amending the administrative policy agreement with the town of Pelham, I believe. And in that resolution, there was a request to add the clerk, deputy clerk, as well as the chief building official. And when that bylaw was passed at the December 21st meeting, I actually forgot to include the names into that appendix. So we're not changing anything. It was already passed by council at the December 21st meeting.
Just adding the names, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, Councillor DeRose.
Is that common when you get hearing officers to have the building? Like, I don't see the building official there, but I see the clerk there. So I'm just wondering, is that a common occurrence, and why isn't the building official there?
Through the mayor to members of council, let me just open it here to make sure that we've got, yeah, sorry. So, what we're doing is actually amending the original bylaw that was passed on December 21st and following the resolution that was passed by council. So the intent was to include my name and to change the actual name of the company to Rutherford Prosecutions. And the reason for that is if you have a specific name in there, when I believe her name is Jane Rutherford has a hearing, she's the only one that could process that hearing. So we change it to the company, so that way it could be anybody that's there. And the reason why we have the 3 of us in that bylaw is just for business continuity.
I just assumed that we were trying to get away from city staff and having, like, why are we having hearing officers then? Why aren't we doing it in-house then?
Sorry, through the mayor to members of council, there's 2 separate issues. We have hearing officers, and then we have what goes through the appeals. So what we've done is we have appointed with the other municipalities through the town of Pelham for the appeals. What we are doing at the city are hearings. So I believe, I don't know if Jason can probably assist with that. He knows the program a little bit better as to why we would have just backup and what the difference is between hearing officers and appeals officers.
Yep, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So city staff, along with any other municipality, we are actually referred to as screening officers. So the bylaw identifies or appoints the city clerk, the deputy city clerk, as well as myself as screening officers. That is the normal practice under the Municipal Act and its regulations. then the individuals have the opportunity to appeal our decisions as screening officers. And that appeal process goes to a third-party hearing officer who is Rutherford Prosecutions. So this bylaw here is just amending our bylaw, updating the name of the hearing officer, who's that third-party contractor. And it is including Joanne Hyde's name as the city clerk, in addition to our deputy city clerk and myself as the screening officers.
Okay, so I assume this is consistent in other communities?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so because we answered these questions now, I'll start again on the first reading. We'll go over it from the start again. First reading of the bylaws moved by Councillor Hanley, seconded by Councillor Sentence, that leave be given to introduce the following bylaws: 17-2022, 18-2022, and 19-2022, and that the same now be read a first time. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Final reading of the bylaws moved by Councillor Hanley and seconded by Councillor Sentence, that the bylaws just read a first time be read a second and third time and do pass, and that the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same. Any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Confirming bylaw. First reading of the bylaw, mover Councillor Longo and the seconder Councillor Wilson, that leave be given to introduce the following bylaw, and bylaw 16-2022, a bylaw to confirm, adopt, and ratify matters dealt with by council resolution. That's bylaw 16-2022, and that now be read a first time. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Final reading of the bylaw, mover Councillor Longo and the seconder Councillor Wilson, that the bylaw just read a first time be read a second and third time and do pass, and that the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same. Any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Adjournment. I have a mover, Councillor Decker, and a seconder, Councillor Neal, that this meeting is hereby adjourned at 9:01 p.m. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And I want to thank everybody for tonight's meeting and all your input. And until the next meeting or specially called, have a good evening and have a great